Welcome back to a year of Final Fantasy, and we're still in the month of Valifor and unofficially in the month of the Chocobo. Today we're going to be talking about another obscure-ish Chocobo game, but this one actually did come over to the States, and this game is called Final Fantasy Fables Chocobo Tales, and that's quite a long name. So this game was actually not created by Square themselves, but a company named Hand, but there's a little period in between each of them. It's kind of weird, but Square Enix did license out their game, I assume, and they produced it and Square Enix published it. And they've actually had their hand in a bunch of these Chocobo titles. Specifically, their most recent incarnation was Chocobo's Dungeon, the one that appeared on the Wii, as well as a few other Chocobo spin-offs, one which was Defunct, which I just actually learned about while researching this, which was Chocobo's Racing 3D. I assume that may have been a 3DS game, but for whatever reason it got cancelled, which is kind of sad. Anyway, this game was put out in Japan on December 14th, 2006, on April 3rd, 2007 in the States, and then a little bit later on May the 25th, 2007 for all the other PAL regions for the Nintendo DS. This is not the 3DS, just to be clear. And this game is sort of a mix of a bunch of different games, both single and multiplayer. While the game is an RPG of sorts, the battle system in here is a kind of card-based battle system, and I'm kind of scratching my head to figure out what game I've played that's like this. I know there's one out there, but I cannot think of it for the life of me. I guess maybe the only thing I can think of is that the feeling it gives me is a kind of Paper Mario-esque game, but even then, I think that's simply from the style of the aesthetics of the game. So even though that the game resolves itself with these kind of card duels, it doesn't really feel like a card game in the sense of what you might expect a Final Fantasy card game to be, like Triple Triad or maybe even the Final Fantasy trading card game. It's nothing like that. The cards themselves allow you to use abilities and weapons and stuff more like a traditional RPG-ish console game. It's just really kind of weird to explain, but it works. These battles themselves are known as pop-up duels, and it's quite easy to see why they've gotten that name. The game itself is set in a traditional fantasy setting. Think of maybe Final Fantasy 1, 3, 5, 9, something like that. However, the actual meat of the game are the stories that take place in the form of these magical picture books, which obviously gives way to these pop-up battles, such as you might see in like a children's pop-up book, or even maybe pop-up birthday cards or something like that. And really, this just gives the game a kind of whimsical nature in the form of actual books. And these books aren't just created from thin air. They're not just little snippets of stories, really. It's quite the opposite, in fact. Much of these stories you experience are taken from real-life fairy tales and an assortment of sources from, let's say, Aesop's Fables or the Grimm's books with the Grimm fairy tales. So we've kind of Final Fantasy-ized them. They aren't really ripped off wholesale. You'll see some familiar faces, notably, of course, our hero's Chocobo. There's also a black mage named Chroma that pops up from time to time, and there's the white mage Sherma, as well as some other characters that you'll meet along the way, and a host of other NPCs that you'll find, different colored Chocobos with their own little personalities. Of course, it's all in the name for fun. So anyway, you're going to find these storybooks, and you're going to go through the game, and not only will you get to experience these little Final Fantasy fables, for lack of a better word, getting all of these cards and items to battle with and everything, you're going to come across a variety of minigames as well, and they will allow you to earn more cards and kind of progress through the story overall. And even more so, you're going to come across these, they term them micro games. They're just like super tiny mini games that are kind of little, a quick aside that you can do. It's not necessarily required to do that to progress through the story. They're completely optional, and you may get some more items or better things from them, kind of just like a side quest would be in a regular Final Fantasy game. I believe at the beginning I said that this game has a variety of play styles, and as you might expect, a game with cards and mini games, you can absolutely play multiplayer, either through wireless, local, or Nintendo Wi-Fi. Well, that last part I'm actually not sure on. I don't know if they still have the servers up. Remember, this is a DS game that launched in 2006, 2007, so, don't take my word that those are still up. However, you can still play locally, which is really cool. And as far as the aesthetics go, I already talked about them being like pop-up books. They're very bright and cartoony and fun in nature, and the music itself also is what you would expect from these Chocobo spin-off games. The music's taken and remixed from other Final Fantasy games, so there's nothing like mind-blowing here, but who doesn't love classic Final Fantasy music, especially in a game that's obviously created for levity. So if you want something a little more on the lighter side, definitely pick up this game. It's not, like I said, gonna blow your mind, but it does have a lot of varied games, mini games. The card battling is fun. Since it does have that card battling aspect, you can get more and varied cards, and that kind of drives you forward forward to play the game more and more. So the game as a whole is kind of clearly more than the sum of its parts. Of course, it has traditional real-life fables, mythologies, in a fun Final Fantasy style. And I do want to mention though that there is a released sequel to this game, but it only came out in Japan. And it's roughly translated into The Witch, the Girl, and the Five Heroes. It actually came out in 2008, and much like my last video over the working Chocobo, this has incredibly little information on it, at least in English, so I don't really want to tackle it in depth here. If there was more information, I definitely would. But next time though, I'm going to be going over all the even more obscure Chocobo games kind of in a bullet point fashion, so I'll try and get that one in there if I can find any more information about it. But if I don't, I just want to mention it here, if not simply for completion's sake. And I guess that's where I'll wrap up the video. Like I said, next time we'll go over all the other Chocobo games that I missed, or at least most of them that I missed, and that'll be the penultimate episode of this month of Valifor, and essentially wrapping up our Chocobo sprint of videos. And then, of course, we'll end off the month with one of my favorites in the series, that's obviously Final Fantasy IX, which as of this recording, the game actually re-released. Tokyo Game Show just happened on PlayStation 4. It re-released one day ago, so that's fresh on the PSN. Go check it out if you haven't yet, but I'll talk more about that re-release whenever we do get to Final Fantasy IX itself. So until next time, Crystal Warriors, keep on gaming.